Hey guys, my name's Alex and I'm a first year medical student at St. George's University. Sorry, this is kind of an awkward setup. I guess I'm just most comfortable on the ground, but so I'm just gonna go through kind of how I set up my lecture stuff, how I went about things in my first term. So obviously it really depends on where you are going. This is just my own personal experience. I did end up being in the top like 10% of my class. And so I'm just kind of going through things that I did and things that really helped me throughout the course. So it really depends, obviously, on the school that you go to. I already said that, but it's really important to keep that in mind. And just some things that I did myself to get prepared for medical school. And even like a few days ahead, like I did not study the summer before going to medical school. They highly advised against that. And I really agree with that because I don't think it's worth getting stressed out because you don't really know the pace of things. You don't really know how they're going to teach things or how to really go about things. So I think it's really important to just chill out. And once you are in medical school, so if you're just kind of wondering on how to go about things like I was, because I was very freaked out going in. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna fail. You shouldn't think that way, and that's just me. I'm very overly anxious and worrisome in that sense, but yeah, so I guess I'm just gonna start off by kind of going through my OneNote. So that's the first thing. I do use OneNote. I know a lot of people use Notability is a big one. I like OneNote. The amount of material that I have and just like all the PowerPoints and things that you have to kind of upload in there makes it really slow. So I just finished term 1. I'm going into term 2. So what I'm going to be doing starting term 2 is I'm just going to take everything that I had for term 1 out of there and put it on a hard drive. I know at the end of term 2 we have this cumulative exam. It's kind of like a mini step 1 in a sense. They do use retired step questions, and I will probably have to review for that. Well, not probably, I will have to review for that, and so then when the time comes, I will open that up. But okay, so let's just go through. So this is my first week ever. So this is how I just set things up. So I did have here lectures, DLAs, and then DLAs are just, I guess the best way to explain it is that they used to have 4-hour lectures a day, and then they trimmed it down to 2. So instead of having those 2 extra lectures, they made it into DLAs or directed learning activities, I guess. Yeah. And that can just be, they're just PowerPoints, and they can be accompanied with a video, or you might just have to read it on your own, which kind of sucks because that's really boring. I'd rather have a video. But yeah, so here we go. So week 1, we had a before lecture DLA. So I went kind of hard, because I was freaking out med school. But yeah, see, this is kind of an example of like how slow OneNote can get. It's usually not this bad like when you just start, but yeah, so here you kind of go through, we're just doing like the plasma membrane, super basic stuff. And then we had orientation, so then I made another OneNote thing for that, and sorry, you'll really realize how slow OneNote gets, and I think that's definitely a downside. I don't really know of anything better. I don't think Notability is like crazy good with space. I think they have limited amount of space, and so I know a lot of people were jealous that I could just keep writing and writing and writing, but they kind of had to stop and like open a new file. So each one has its pros and cons, but so here, my semester was about, I guess 16 weeks. Yeah, 16 weeks, but we did have about a week break, just because of a holiday, and then we also got extra time to study for MSK, which is the musculoskeletal system, and that's just really, 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 really heavy anatomy, and they were really nice and gave us a nice long break for that. Our first module was FTM, or Foundations to Medicine, so that's more of like the cell structure stuff. And then it went to things like MSK, so the musculoskeletal. Then we did CPR, which is cardiopulmonary and renal system. And that was split into 2 different parts. The first part was cardiology, second part was pulmonary and renal. Something else that I had here are just random notes. So my school has DES sessions that you can go to, and those were really, really, really helpful because you could just go there on a topic, and they would have these sessions, and they'd be like, oh, today we're going to be going over glycolysis, or going over a difficult topic, or kind of just doing a review of the week. And so it'd be really nice to go to these sessions once a week, see something that you don't really understand. And I would just take notes, and they would give you nice tips. Something else that I really recommend is right here. So this is step 1, first aid. This is from term 1, which I didn't start using this until probably the last module, and that was kind of dumb, I'll admit. But yeah, this is just from one module that I just started writing stuff in it. It's super helpful. It's basically a cheat sheet of what's on step 1. So if you memorize this all, you'll be good, apparently. But yeah, so that was really helpful. I really used it to kind of pick out difficult material from lecture, or just pick out things that you wouldn't really think you would have to know. There's a lot of little topics that they don't really focus much on lecture. They'll kind of skim by it. Obviously, you should know everything. Obviously, that's not even possible because of the amount of material that they give you. I mean, if you just look right here, this was just my first week. And I think we started, it's just Monday to Friday, but then you have all these. So I have my lectures here, lecture 1, lecture 2, lecture 3, but then everything in between, those are considered DLAs. So they either had a video or something that I had to go through. Small group, here, I'll give you an example if this loads. You're not doing very good advertisement. One note. Okay, yeah, so this is a good example. So small group, it could either be you would have to go through, so this is kind of a how-to about it. But so they would give you histological slides like this, for example. And you would have to say the stain, what magnification it's at, what is the specimen in the picture, and kind of its function. And you gotta say things like, oh yeah, this is probably high magnification. I can tell that it's high magnification because I can see the nucleus very clearly. I can see some cell-to-cell junctions. Just whatever you see is really good enough. If you're starting out, they really just like to see you try. And I wouldn't say the first part or the first year, first semester, whatever, is easy, but they definitely help you a lot more, I would say, because then after that you kind of get the hang of the workload. But at the same time, I'm only term 1. I'm just going based off of what I've said or what I've heard. And I started in January. So I went January to end of May, and then now I have a little bit of a break, 2-month break, so that's really nice. And then I go back on July 31st, and then I start my term 2 on August 6th. So then, so they'll just give you different images. This is kind of an intro to it all, so it's not really typical of what they have. Here, let me find a better one. So yeah, this is another perfect example. Sometimes they'll give you a medical journal that you have to read, and you kind of have to answer questions based off that. So there's a lot of variation, and it's all relevant to whatever you're doing in lecture. I personally found it very helpful. Some people, they want to sleep in or they want to skip it, but everything is fair game for being brought up on the exam, for being brought up on step, and if they're bringing it up in lecture and then they're bringing it up again in lab, you already know that it's pretty important. So then later on, once I started doing like the musculoskeletal, they had us go into the cadaver lab. So, here, wait, let me open. Yeah, so this is an example. So, imaging of lab. So, just, I guess, for attendance points, they had you draw brachial plexus and label things. It's a very rough sketch. And they'll also give you a lot of imaging, so they'll have you ID all of these different things, just saying that's the sternum, that's the vertebrae, so and so. Kind of explain the different parts of the spine, just the different curves. Yeah, and that's just to supplement like actually going there and looking at the cadaver and IDing it from there. Let's see what else. Oh, and now personally what I would do, so lecture would be like 1 hour per lecture, and we would have 2 lectures a day. So some people like to pre-read. I didn't start pre-reading until like the end of the term because I don't know, I guess you feel so busy and you really make time for what you feel like you can do. Obviously you want to try and do everything and you want to try and do everything really thoroughly, but it's not always possible. So yeah, I didn't really pre-read. Pre-reading just like going over the lecture before it's actually being given. I would mainly just post-read. So what that would consist of is me going through the lecture, and at the same time I would have 2 OneNotes. So I would have one here and then one here, just split screen. And this is an example of a post-read of mine. So from the first lecture that I showed you, kind of the cell membrane, just some basic stuff. OneNote's really nice because you can add images, how I did here, and kind of bring up important topics. I didn't really know how to post-read at this point because I think I went too in-depth. Post-reads they're meant to be a summary of what you learned, and it's not meant to be crazy in-depth because you're going to be going over the same lecture over and over and over. So for example, even, you would kind of pre-read it for 15-30 minutes before lecture. So that's your first pass. Then you would be listening to the lecture and taking notes. That's your second pass. Then you're doing post-reads, so then that's your third pass. And then on the weekends, you would just reread everything. And so that was what I did, and I would just go through every lecture, not spending 5 hours on one lecture, but just kind of spending an hour, having my whiteboard next to me, and just constantly rewriting things that I feel like I should memorize, or trying to remember what I can remember from a Monday, even though it's Saturday. And then, obviously, you would review it again on the weekend or week before lecture, or before your exam. And practice questions is very key, so I don't know how other schools are, but St. George's does a very good job of making Department of Educational Services groups, and these are groups on Facebook that are made by students, and they'll just post so many questions that are relevant to like this material and to like material on STEP. I mean, everything that we're learning is relevant for STEP, so it's really nice that these students, they'll actually make their own questions that are relevant to our lecture material specifically and relevant to STEP. So I think that's really cool, and I'm sure that other universities do it. So I would usually just review, the lectures from that week, and kind of, if I have time, I'll even go back to the lectures that were from the previous week, but that's only if I don't feel swamped. And I always try to do 5 to 10 questions each day. So just multiple choice questions that I find on their Facebook page, or questions that the professor assigned. Yeah, I think that's all for now, but if you guys have any questions just about like St. George's, or how to review, or how to go over lecture material, I feel like I'm in opinion. I think it's good to grab a lot of opinions, grab any information that you can get from everyone, because everyone's so different, and everyone I asked gave me different answers, And I kind of just pick and chose like what worked for me, because some things that worked for them and they're very successful didn't work for me, and I ended up being successful in my first term. So yeah, just like leave any comments or any videos that you think would be helpful for you, or if you are interested in St. George's, like I'd be so glad to talk to you guys about it. All right, thanks. Bye.